suspects are being. One case involves the FBI is now offering $100,000 to see for the police are releasing.
Welcome to Misty Mysteries, a paranormal and true crime podcast. Paranormal fact for this week is the Zach Bagans Museum in Las Vegas has some of the most haunted items such as the Lugosi mirror, Dybbuk box, countless haunted dolls, and the Devil's rocking chair. Even with all those items in his museum, Zach Bagans still has 8 full storage units full of items in Las Vegas. This week, I bring you an American urban legend that will make you think twice about knocks on your front door. Have you heard of Anchor? Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. When I started Misty Mysteries, I didn't know where to go, and Anchor helped me get Misty Mysteries started without charging me an arm and a leg. Anchor is really my suggestion for anyone looking to start a podcast. It has tools that allow you to record and edit in-app or on the website. Anchor distributes your podcasts on all the listening places such as Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Good Pods, and all your favorite listening places. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place, and best of all, it's totally free, all on Anchor FM and on the Anchor app. Late one night on a warm spring night in 1996, Brian Bethel was in his apartment when he realized he had to pay a bill. At 9:30 p.m., he left his apartment for downtown Abilene, Texas, to drop off his payment in a drop box of his internet provider. It was a 10 to 15 minute drive from his apartment. He pulled into the parking lot past a $1.50 theater that was playing the 1995 Mortal Kombat movie. Brian pulled into an empty parking space, using the glow from the theater to write a check, when he heard a knock on the driver's side window. He looked over to see 2 boys, somewhere between 10 to 14. One of the boys spoke, while the other boys just stood there. The boy who spoke was taller. He had olive-toned skin, curly brown hair, and wore a pullover hoodie. The second boy, who was quiet, had pale skin with freckles, pale orange hair, and wore a light green hoodie with jeans. The boy seemed very nervous, while the other boy seemed more confident. Brian immediately thought, "Oh great, they're gonna ask me for money," when he noticed the air felt weird. The taller boy gave Brian a smile that made him very uneasy. He felt a fight or flight moment. Brian rolled down the window and said, "Yes?" The taller boy smiled bigger, saying to Brian, "Hey mister, what's up? We have a problem," in a voice that seemed more like a young man, not a boy. "You see, my friend and I want to see films, but we forgot our money and we need to go to our house to get it. Want to help us out?" Brian only managed to mutter, well, when he noticed the quiet boy looked confused and upset, but not at his friend or the situation, but that Brian hadn't opened the door for him yet. The taller boy told Brian, "Come on, mister. Now, we just want to go to our house, and we're just 2 little boys." "What movie are you going to see?" Brian asked. The taller boy said, "Oh, Mortal Kombat, of course." When Brian looked over at the theater, he noticed the last showing of the movie started an hour ago. Staying quiet and feeling uncomfortable, he heard the taller boy say, "Come on, mister, let us in. We can't get into your car until you do. You know, just let us in, and we'll be gone before you know it. We'll go into our mother's house." He locked eyes with the kids, and he almost unlocked his door, but quickly stopped. He looked away, and when he looked back, he noticed their eyes for the first time. The kids' eyes were completely black, no pupils or irises, just black. The quiet boy had a look of almost panic, as if they had been caught doing something, while the taller boy's face turned from smiling to anger. The taller boy talked to Brian again. "Come on, mister. We won't hurt you. You have to let us in. We don't have a gun." Brian's hand started towards his gear shift, though the taller boy, in anger, "We can't come in unless you tell us it's okay. Let us in." Brian quickly reversed back out of the parking spot, seeing the boys in his peripheral, but when he looked back, there was no one there. Brian called his best friend Chad to talk about what happened to him with the 2 young boys. Chad had 2 young women at the time with him that have some sort of clairvoyance abilities. He told his story on the speakerphone for all three, leaving out that the boys had black eyes till the end for dramatics. One of the women stopped Brian's story and asked him, "These children had black eyes, right? I mean, all black eyes." In which he replied, "Yes." She then told him, "One night last week, I had children with black eyes outside my house, wanting to be let in, but there was something wrong with them, and it took me a while to realize it was their eyes." Brian had just started his story, hadn't even gotten to the part where they asked to come into his car, and he asked, "What did you do?" Then she told him, "I kept my doors and windows locked. I knew if I let them in, they would have killed me, and they would have killed you too if you let them in." This is the story from Brian Bethel, a journalist who reported it on January 16th, 1996, 2 years after his experience that started the urban legend of black-eyed kids. Black-eyed kids appear in groups of 2 to 4 children from the ages of 6 to 16. The children are pale with eyes that are completely black. They dress outdated or wrong for the weather. The black-eyed children speak weirdly as if they aren't from this time or older than they are. The children appear late at night at your front door or near your car in a parking lot or stoplight. Their goal is to get inside your home or car. They will ask you to let them in by asking you to use your phone, usually in odd ways like, "Can I use your telegram?" or will ask for rides home. People who have encountered these children report feeling dread as if something awful is happening. The children also affect electronics, making TVs go staticky and making animals panic. If you let them into your home or car, it's believed they will bring you death or bad luck. One man named John Northwood recalls an encounter he had with black-eyed kids. John was at a conference that got out late, and while walking to his car that he parked in a parking structure, a man who was at the conference with him named Doug told John about some freaky kids hanging out around his car. Doug asked if he could get a ride from John. John agreed to drive Doug around for a bit till he could safely get to his car. The two men had drove past Doug's car to get out of the structure. That's when they saw 3 children, 1 girl around 15, and 2 boys, one 14 and one 10. John stopped his car because he felt he needed to stop and looked at the children. That's when the youngest spoke up to John saying, "It's scary out there, all on our own. We just wanted a ride home." While the other said Doug was going to give them a ride home. Doug was annoyed and told John he was just going to get out of the car, but as soon as he touched the handle, John saw them age, and he noticed their eyes. They were all black, no pupils or irises. At that moment, John hit reverse and backed the car up 60 feet, but the children started to chase them. John drove as fast as he could out of the parking structure, feeling like if he let them in the car, the men were going to die. At the exit of the parking structure was the oldest boy. John just sped past him, but he seemed to disappear once they got out of the structure. The men waited 10 minutes till they felt safe enough to go back to the structure. In that moment, Doug admitted he told the children he would drive them home till he saw the older child and got scared. When John took Doug back, all felt okay and seemed safe till they started driving away. John drove behind Doug. John started to feel the feeling of death and dread he felt before with the children. In that moment, Doug misjudged a yellow light. In the middle of the intersection, Doug's car was hit by a truck. Doug didn't survive the accident. John stayed to give a report to the police, and when he looked, he saw the children standing down the street from the accident. Black-eyed children are unknown supernatural creatures, but that doesn't stop the many theories of what they could be. The black-eyed kids have been linked to shadow figures, vampires, and demons due to them needing permission to enter someone's home or car, along with the feeling of death and accidents that come shortly after they visit. The feeling of dread and death that come along with them also make people believe that these children could even be children of Satan that he had with people. But some believe maybe these black-eyed kids are a mix of alien and human, or alien and some other supernatural creature, like a demon. The children are very unusual with the clothes that don't seem to match the weather, their strange, polite, but demanding way of speaking, and even disappearing the way they do. A Vermont woman and her husband shared a story that links these children to the Men in Black from 2015. The woman and her husband lived in a rural area of Vermont that was getting a snowstorm when she woke up to a loud knock on her door. Knowing someone may be in trouble due to the bad weather, she checked outside her window where she saw fresh footprints. Her motion light on her porch was on, but no cars were to be found. She was scared and woke up her husband to answer the door. When her husband opened the door, he saw 2 young children, a boy and a girl around 8 years old. The girl had long, straight hair, and the boy had a bowl cut. She remembered the children definitely weren't dressed for a snowstorm. Her husband asked if they were okay, but the children didn't answer. She then said, "Where are your parents?" The children told her, "They'll be here soon." They let the children in, and all they seemed to say was, "Our parents will be here soon." She decided to make the children hot chocolate and help warm them up when she noticed her cats, that usually greeted everyone, hid, while one growled and hissed at the children from under the kitchen island. She thought it was unusual that her cats were freaking out, but she brought the kids the drinks anyways, but that's when she noticed their eyes. She almost dropped the mugs in fear. The children noticed her reaction and asked if they could use her bathroom. She tried to use this time to talk to her husband about the children, but he got a bloody nose. She hurried to get him tissues when the power went out in the house, but the children didn't seem affected at all. They were just standing at the end of the hallway in the dark and said to her, "Our parents are here." The children walked out of the front door and left it wide open. She rushed to close and lock the door when she noticed the children go into a mysterious car with 2 very tall men in suits. Months after this encounter, the couple's cat that hissed at the children died at home of a hemorrhage, and the other 3 cats just disappeared. Both her and her husband started to have regular nosebleeds. Her husband was diagnosed with an aggressive form of skin cancer, and she doesn't want to go into detail, but she said her health progressively is getting worse. We don't know exactly what the black-eyed kids are, but what we do seem to know is that they not only make you feel uneasy and have a heavy sense of dread, but they seem to bring death and accidents for those who let them in. If you hear a knock on your car window at night or your front door and hear kids asking to be let in, remember not to let them in if they have black eyes. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Misty Mysteries. If you like the podcast, please share with friends, family, and on social media. Speaking of social media, you can find the podcast on places such as Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Please leave a good review for the podcast on places like Apple Podcasts and Podchasers. If you'd like to support the podcast and get your name shouted out on the podcast, please find Misty Mysteries on Buy Me a Cup of Coffee, which you can find in our episode description. By supporting the podcast, you allow the podcast to not only grow, but to help bring you guys merchandise and special episodes. You can find the podcast on listening places such as Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and so many more. If you like this episode, I also have a true crime episode on Wednesday. As always, my sources can be found in the episode description, and I'll see you on Wednesday.